Today on Living History, we are speaking with Alice Chiu.
My father wanted to bring his favorite food, which is ice cream, to China. He felt that real ice cream had a lot of vitamins, calcium, it's good for the body. So he brought it in 1990, worked with the Beijing Agricultural Department. We were the first brand that they had brought in. And I was very fortunate to grow up with that, with people who had vision. You know, at the time when my father came to China, I was like, are you crazy?
Today, we're speaking with Alice Chiu. In 1991, she came with her father to China, the founder of Bashi Bingxiling. Having grown up in California, China in those days was a huge adjustment for Alice. But she figured it out and found her own success. Alice has had a front row seat to the changes in the food and beverage business in China. She helped bring both Häagen Dazs and Starbucks to China, and most recently, the elegant chain La Dorée. We're very glad to speak with her today. Alice Chiu, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me about coming to China in 1991. I believe you told me there was not even McDonald's.
There wasn't. I almost starved. I was straight out of university, just graduated. My parents came in 1990 to start the Bashi. Bashi was launched in 1991. So I came straight out of San Jose State University. I grew up in Atherton, California, close to Stanford University. You know, it's a very nice area. Then coming here, although we lived in one of the best hotels at the time, it was a Russian hotel, the Friendship Hotel in Beijing. In 1991, it was a big adjustment because at the time I didn't even speak Chinese. So, you know, you have a Chinese face and you don't speak Chinese and people look at you weird. So I came with the plant manager of Dryers. My father had hired the plant manager of Dryers Ice Cream from the US to come to China to help build the Bashi brand. And at the time, it was built in Beijing. And he bought, at the time, the best ice cream equipment in the world from Denmark, Alfa Laval Hoyer, which also makes Tetra Pak. So in 1991, we had already a top-notch factory, you know, and it was my first time, you know, well, not in China. My parents came in 86 when China first opened up for a tour, but it was my first time really working because straight out of university. And we were, you know, I grew up in a completely white neighborhood. So coming to China was a huge adjustment for me.
What was it like for you to come to China in 1991? You said before everyone around you was white and suddenly everyone around you was
Asian.
Similar. What kind of reactions would you get and how did you make friends? How did it make you feel?
So at the time, most of my friends were expats, were Americans. It's easier for me to relate. There wasn't a huge expat community, but we worked with Beijing Agricultural Department at the time, and they actually had a few brands. They brought in Andros, you know, the jam, Andros. They eventually brought in McDonald's, and Simplot, who makes the French fries for McDonald's worldwide. So there were a few expats just within that group. In the beginning, I tried to immerse myself. I tried to find myself in the Chinese culture, and I decided that did not make me happy. So be who I am, and I'm Chinese American, and I just gave up immersing myself in the Chinese culture, and just take it as it comes. It took me about 10 years to actually be content. I'm very content now. You know, living in China, I'm very fortunate, I think. I hate to say this, but I've been here for 30 years, since 33 years, oh my gosh, since 1991. And, it did take me a while to find myself, to find my own space, my own place, and be happy. So I'm very happy here now. I'm very fortunate, I think. If I didn't come here, I would not be where I am now. And all the brands, the US is very saturated, I'm sure you know. I'd probably be a middle manager somewhere, working in hopefully a big company maybe. But here, I've seen China grow. I've seen China change. I would say in 1991, every time I go back to the US, I would go once a year for 1 month. I come back and there's a new building. China builds so quickly. So I've seen the culture, the history, the people change as they accept Western brands, a little bit of the Western lifestyle. And China has become a lot more open. So I'm very happy to be here. I would not see history if I didn't come. I came because I felt obligated at the time. I'm here in the US partying. I had 2 sports cars at the time, and my parents are in China, So I'm the favorite. So I came because I felt obligated to, and I don't regret it. Maybe in the beginning it was very difficult, but I never regretted the decision to come. I think I've met people from all over the world. I meet you guys. I would never meet all these different people. When I was at Bashi, they sent Danish engineers in, and I met the Danish engineers. I've grown and seen the things. I think if I were in the US, I would never be as exposed, because American people, I did, think the world revolves around the sun, revolves around the US. So I did that. I think coming to China, I've seen more, done more, and I'm very fortunate to be here.
I think a lot of people in China have childhood memories of Bashi Bingxiling. But what was it like for you guys to start this when the country had very little experience with free markets, with private enterprises?
Yes. So at the time, my father in 1991, he came in 1990, I came in 1991. So how it all started, he actually had retired for 10 years before coming to China. And he said, family meeting, I want to bring my favorite food to the motherland. Because I went to the US when I was 2 years old. I said, where is the motherland? Not jokingly, I was actually serious. Because I grew up in the US. I was American, Chinese American. So my father wanted to bring his favorite food, which is ice cream, to China. He felt that real ice cream had a lot of vitamins, calcium, it's good for the body. So he brought it in 1990, worked with the Beijing Agricultural Department, who is now Sanyuan Milk. We were the first brand that they had brought in. And I was very fortunate to grow up with that, to grow up with people who had vision. At the time when my father came to China, I was like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? And that look at what China is today, right? The infrastructure, the growth, the brand. For example, I saw a news article about Yum. And Yum now, KFC now, China is, I think, 45% of their global revenues. But when we came in 1991, there was very few private restaurants, even Chinese private restaurants. I came from a background of Michelin star restaurants, eating in San Francisco. My father was a huge foodie. So I came from a background of just a lot of diversity in the food I ate. And when I came here, and there was no McDonald's, I was like, oh my gosh. But I've seen the country grow, I've seen the brand grow, I've seen the market grow, and the market now is just so open to new brands, to new investors, and I'm just so happy that I could be a part of it.
Tell me, you mentioned the Department of Agriculture was the supplier for Bashi in those days?
No, the Department of Agriculture was my father's joint venture partner, because in those days you cannot be a WOFE, which means wholly owned foreign enterprise. You had to have some Chinese investment, minimum of 5%, I think, at the time. So my father had invested 70% in Baxi Ice Cream, and the Departure of Agriculture, Beijing Agriculture, BAIC, now they changed their name to Sanyuan Milk. They made themselves a corporation. They had 30%. And the uncles who brought them, who was a part of my father's joint venture partner, they were so supportive. And they also taught me a lot about business that I think I would have never learned if I was still in the US. So a little story about McDonald's. When they brought in McDonald's, I call him Uncle Xing. He was the one who negotiated for McDonald's. So he took me under his wing, and he brought me to the McDonald's negotiations and told them I was a translator. Although my Chinese wasn't so good at the time, and then he bought a real translator. And the McDonald's guy was like, why does this person have two translators? So he brought me to the negotiations to see how he negotiated with McDonald's. And I still remember to this day that first meeting. It was like in 1992, I think. The McDonald's guy had said, we don't want conflict of interest. McDonald's, when you set it up, cannot buy anything from your subsidiary companies. And Uncle Xing said, I agree, write that in the contract. You cannot buy anything from our subsidiary companies. And McDonald's was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. Because he was the agricultural department. You had to buy everything from him. Chicken, beef, vegetables. So in the end, of course, that was not written in the contract, because at the time there was no one else you can buy from. I mean, as a F&B, a global F&B company. So I still remember that tidbit, from 1992. And I think I'm just very fortunate.
What did you learn from those uncles who were doing business here in China, and what did they learn from you?
Well, I learned a lot from the uncles in the government at the time. I don't know if they learned anything from me. I felt, a spoiled brat from California coming into China. Americans, we think we're all that. We still think we're all that. I'm Chinese American. I know how we think. And when I came in, I would say I was a little bit arrogant. Not a little bit, a lot. I came from a good background. I was very fortunate in the U.S. I had sports cars, shopped, very young at, major brands, Ferragamo, that type of thing. So I came in a spoiled brat, and I thought I knew everything, right? And I think I learned from the Chinese people a lot. I've obviously grown, I've been traumatized. So to tell you the truth, me now, I don't think I would be friends with me back then, because I would be like, who is this arrogant, spoiled brat sitting in front of me? I don't think I would be friends with myself. So I learned a lot from the uncles. I felt that they were very educated. In 1991, when people thought China was still a third world country, I thought that. I met all these people who were in the government, who were very refined and very knowledgeable and very open to global news, to global policies. And I did. I learned a lot. I opened my eyes. I think that the uncles were very open to a California spoiled brat. And they taught me a lot. The uncle from the Beijing Agriculture Department, even in his 70s, he would tell me stories about when he first joined the agricultural department. Even in his 70s, he took me cherry picking one day in Beijing. And he climbed to the top of the tree. I'm like, Uncle Xi, what are you doing up there? He's like, I'm from the agricultural department. Of course I can do this. So they're very humble, even though they were very high up the food chain. I met like the vice mayor of Beijing. I just thought they were very humble. They were not hard to approach, or I didn't feel they were, or intimidating. They were just very open to teach me new things. So as I keep saying, I am very fortunate, yes.
So now you've made the connections, you have the machines. What happens next? You have to launch the product, right? You have to go to market.
You know, with Bashi, we came in, we have the joint venture partner, we have the equipment from Denmark, which was amazing, by the way. I learned so much. And we brought in the plant managers. So then with Bashi, we had to get the recipes, the formulas right. So the formulas obviously is from the US. The ingredients in the beginning, we also imported from the US. The strawberries, the cocoa powder. Cocoa powder was actually from South Africa. All the ingredients were imported until we could find the ingredients here. So the next thing was pricing strategy, marketing positioning in 1991. So when we first came out, of course, we had the small cups, the Bashi cups, which is 50 grams. Then we have the 3-gallon for hotels, restaurants, entertainment. So the small Bashi cups we sold for, at 1991, we sold for 3.8 RMB. And it caused a ruckus because, are you crazy selling for 380? Because at the time, there was ice cream, which Xing Dalu, which doesn't exist anymore. It was 50 cents, 5毛钱. It was 50 cents. But we were made 100% from dairy. And they were made from ice cream powder. And I think what my father, when he launched, we also launched in the American Embassy. So when we launched, it was, what he wanted to tell the public was, this is dairy, it's good for your kids, it's got calcium. And one of the things that Chinese people, even in the US, always had was either lactose intolerant or calcium deficiencies. So bone density was a problem for Chinese people, whether they're in the US or in China. So when we launched, was educating. How do you educate the market? Why are you 3.80 RMB, right? And at the time in 1993, there was a television soap opera called 我爱我家. And my mother actually made friends with them. My mother got Bashi into like China World, into the government, 钓鱼台. So we got into 我爱我家. And one of the stars of 我爱我家would always wear a Bashi t-shirt and be eating Baxi ice cream because it was summertime. At the time, nobody knew about product positioning in TVs. It was summertime, they were hot. We just kept supplying them ice. I mean, we knew about product placement, but he would just keep eating ice cream on the soap opera. So that actually shot Bashi to a new level, and people would try it. So, obviously, Bashi has been on the market for about 30 years now. My father got older, of course, he was around 75, 6. we sold our share, 70%, to Baskin Robbins at the time. And in 99, Baskin Robbins sold their share to Sangyuan. So now it's 100% state-owned by Sangyuan.
Amazing. You must be very proud.
I am. I'm very proud. I'm proud of my parents. They were part of history. And one of the things I mentioned to Chris was, I'm afraid that people will forget who founded Bashi, why Bashi is here. I think 99% of the people don't know. Maybe even in the company itself don't know. So I'm very proud to be part of that. I'm very proud my parents had the guts to come to China in 1990. I think my parents had vision. At the time, I was kicking and screaming. I felt obligated. I didn't come out of like, let's go to Hollywood or something. But I'm glad I'm here.
What about after Bashi Bingxiling? I think you said you decided to strike out on your own.
Yes. So after Bashi, I went over to Häagen Dazs. At the time, Häagen Dazs had just in 1997 launched in Shanghai. And in 1997, Häagen Dazs spent 20 million RMB. In 1997, that's a lot of money, to do a 3-month TV advertisement on 还珠格格. I don't know if you remember that TV show. We were prime time, it was hot back then. We had 3 TV commercials a night, and we were in the supermarkets. So sales, of course, during those 3 months went up, but after the TV advertisement stopped, the sales went down. So we had internal discussions, internal meetings. Do we spend another 20 million on TV advertisement? Or do we take this 20 million and open stores? We can open 3 to 5 stores. We can, have them for 3 to 5 years with this 20 million. And it could be a live billboard. So obviously, we opened our first store in Nanjing Donglu as a live billboard. Everything was very luxurious. Our tagline at the time was an affordable luxury. What we came up with were ice cream creations because Chinese people like to share. So the ice cream creations were 200 RMB at the time in 1997. So it's basically, we wanted to show you an affordable luxury. So it's where the movie stars ate. We weren't saying, come to our stores. We were saying, look at our stores. Go to the supermarket and buy what the movie stars eat for 75 RMB for a pint, right? Instead of 200 RMB. So it's a good deal. Häagen Dazs used the stores as a marketing tool. It came from our marketing budget. It did not, the stores did not have to make money. It was just a live billboard. And that's where we wanted it to be. When we launched the first Häagen Dazs store in Beijing, in 国际俱乐部 next to St. Regis, I'm from the US, I like all these like ancient Chinese kung fu movies and all of this. So we came up with this launch where 1 or 2 months before we launched the store, we had people dressed up in ancient Chinese costumes, like Huanghou, Queen's costume. And they would be out in the major areas in Beijing handing out pamphlets. The Queen is not happy. What would make the Queen happy? So we had a whole 1-page advertisement on Beijing Evening News. At the time, people read newspapers, okay? So we had 1-page advertising, the Queen's not happy. What would make the Queen happy? And we had Deng Xiaoping, at the time, a Taiwanese singer who sang Xin Tairan. So he was on the radio advertisement. I will be here on this date. If you can guess what would make the Queen happy, you can see me. So he was at the launch that day, we had held the launch in the parking lot, and we had to hire 100 security guards because we knew there would be a lot of people there. So we did this little skit where the king and queen with concubines would walk up to the throne, and the audience is facing the throne. So first you would have acrobats come in to try to make the queen happy. Also, we made it into a show for the audience, of course, to try to make the queen happy. And of course, she's still not happy. We had Shaolin Kung Fu people come in and do a Kung Fu act, and that did not make the queen happy. So finally, we had Marco Polo come in with a 2 meter long ice-carved dragon boat with Häagen Dazs ice cream on top of it. And they took a Häagen Dazs ice cream and fed it to the queen, and she smiled, and it made the queen happy. So all of a sudden, the concubines tore off their costumes and had a Häagen Dazs t-shirt. Then Deng Xiaoping jumped out and sang a song, I'm so happy. Then, of course, sang Xin Tairan, his famous song at the time. And that's how we launched Häagen Dazs in Beijing.
At this point, we would like to take a moment to tell you about our project. The period between China's opening in 1979 under Deng Xiaoping and the 2010 Shanghai Expo deserves to be remembered. We want to collect the memories that Chinese, Americans, and other foreigners made together during these times. We hope you will subscribe to our channel to see many more interviews like this one in the coming weeks. If you too have a story that you think needs to be remembered, we would very much like to hear from you. And we would like to thank the U.S. Consulate in Shanghai for their generous support. Without their sponsorship, we would not have been able to start this channel.
You said in the beginning you didn't like Chinese food, and it took you a while to like Chinese food. How did you discover it, and what became your favorite Chinese food?
When I was young, I grew up in California. So California is very diversified. There's Japanese, Italian, French, American, obviously, and Chinese. And I still love Chinese American food. Okay, the Chinese sweet and sour, but my team laughs at me when I order sweet and sour pork, but I still like, but I do love Chinese food now. So in the beginning, when my mom finally realized I'm raising an American kid, she's like, this won't do, okay? So she would make food for me, like 葱油饼, green onion pancake. She would make it with peanut butter without the tong, to sort of transition me from, it was a peanut butter 油饼 pancake, transition me, and then finally go to 葱油饼. So she kind of fooled me that way. So she would make these more American Chinese food, then slowly transition me to Chinese. She made pot stickers, which I love, and then made it into 水饺, dumplings. So she had like 葱油饼 made with peanut butter. It's actually quite good. You guys should try it sometime. And then finally used green onion in the end. So she would just use products like that to transition me over. She would do oatmeal with milk, and then finally do congee with sugar in it, and then transition me to normal congee, like savory congee, the one with pork and 皮蛋瘦肉 with the century egg and the pork. So she would transition me over. But of course, coming to China, I started to eat more Chinese food and have more exposure to the different regions of Chinese food.
What's your favorite Chinese food today?
Beijing duck. My favorite Chinese food ever since I was a kid is Beijing duck, because one thing Chinese people may be spoiled with, and they may not know, is you can, in China, go to any restaurant and order Beijing duck like this. But in the US, you had to, when I was younger, you had to order Beijing duck 24 to 48 hours ahead of time. So when we ate Beijing duck, it was for special occasions. So in my mind, Beijing duck brings happiness, special occasions, and celebrations. So I still love Beijing duck to this day. And I'm still amazed I can go into any restaurant and order a Beijing duck like now. So, yes.
Tell me about making friends. Like, family comes with you, but when you are an expat and you come over somewhere else, you have to do something very difficult, is to make new friends as an adult.
Yes.
How did you break the ice with people here?
Well, as I said, when I first came, I wanted to try to immerse myself into Chinese culture. So when I first came, I actually worked in Bashi in production, like scrubbing floors. And not many people knew I was the owner's daughter. So I actually came with the plant manager from Dryers. And they thought I was his translator, except I couldn't speak Chinese. They're like, what kind of translator is this? So my first friends were actually Chinese people that work in production in Bashi. Also the Danish engineers who built, the factory. So when I first came, I made friends with the factory workers. And I worked in factory, I scrubbed floors. I knew how to run the machines in the factories. It was fun. These huge, like 10-ton stainless steel, canisters. And, we were scrubbing them, and I learned a lot. And my first friends were the factory workers. Then I found that you cannot be so close with the employees, right? It's difficult to draw the line. So you sort of have to put yourself out there to make friends. You have to be sort of outgoing, which I'm not by nature, but it did make me more outgoing to be able to meet different people and hear their stories. It's amazing to hear people's
stories. Would you hear?
How people came here, why they came here, how the people ended up in Beijing with the brands that they were with, and where they came from. I thought their stories were amazing. You meet a lot of different people. I even met Hillary Clinton came March 8th in the 90s. And the Secret Service people were so nice because we served her ice cream. So I would never have met those people if I stayed in the US. So I've met people from all over the world, even movie stars. So yeah, it's amazing.
Which movie stars? I have to ask.
Well, they probably don't remember. But so as I told you, I didn't know I was Chinese in the beginning. Up till I was 9, I literally thought I was white because I grew up in an all-white neighborhood. Then my parents figured out that this kid is not Chinese. So they got me into Bruce Lee movies. I love Bruce Lee. And then eventually I got into Jackie Chan movies. In the US, they had English. So I got into I was able to meet Jackie Chan. Here in China, yeah, he's amazing. He's a very sweet guy, very approachable. I met, Zheng Ziwei, which is part of the Jackie Chan crowd. And Zheng Qianqi, I mentioned, the singer. And I met a few others, Chinese stars, the stars from 我爱我家 Everybody was very nice.
I think you also told me that people were very attracted to Western brands, something like Hard Rock Cafe, something like that.
Oh, yes. At the time, it was very early on, so people were very attracted to things, the new brands that came in, like Hard Rock Cafe. When Hard Rock Cafe came, I mean, it's passé now, right? But when Hard Rock Cafe came into Beijing, I think it was in 1997, 98 in Beijing. And it was really the Hard Rock Cafe. I mean, they had Eric Clapton come to Hard Rock Cafe, and they really brought rock and roll people in. And people had to wait 2 hours to get into Hard Rock Cafe at the time. I got to know the Hard Rock Cafe management because we supplied ice cream to Hard Rock Cafe. So it was amazing. I would have friends call me at midnight and say, you know, Alice, I know you know people at the Hard Rock Cafe. We're in a line, 2-hour line, get us in. And I would say, no, because there were no real American food on the street. In the hotels, yes, but not on the street. So Hard Rock Cafe came in, you know, with buffalo wings and all my favorite American food. And of course, they had a huge bar, which at the time was very difficult to find, to find in Beijing. So Hard Rock Cafe made like a ton of money. I was told that they got their ROI, their capex back in the first year. So they made a ton of money. They had their dinner, their meal times, you know, lunch, dinner, but they also had the bar times. After 8 p.m., they charged you an entrance fee, and you get a free like beer or soft drink with that entrance fee, and then you would buy alcohol when you're there. So it would turn almost into a nightclub. After 8 p.m., there would be dancing, they moved the tables. At the time, there was nothing else like it. So Hard Rock Cafe did great at that time. Then, of course, you know, they didn't change. So then there was a lot of other competition. So that it sort of died off.
How did people's expectations change?
Well, you know, in the F&B industry, over the years, I've been here 30 years in the F&B industry, there has been so much change. So with the changes in the F&B industry, I think in the beginning when there wasn't a lot of competition, people were just amazed by whatever came into the market. When you, at that time, like Hard Rock Cafe, you can just put like any restaurant name and it would be packed. But over the years, you know, in 1999, we launched the first Starbucks in China. So now, you know, a 32 RMB cup of coffee is very common. And, you know, most people think, oh, you opened the first Starbucks, it must have been so easy. No, it was not. Nobody knew who Starbucks was at the time. So we had to build the foundation, educate the market. And as my father educated the market with Bashi, you know, educating the market with Häagen Dazs, with Starbucks, every brand that came in, you had to educate the market. And the market obviously has become much more sophisticated, right? Now, the expectation from the target consumer is also much higher. You know, we have Dalvatorio, we have Michelin 3-star restaurants, we have UV. You know, by the way, I'm so amazed with Paul Perrier. So a shout out to Paul Perrier. I want to go to your UV restaurant sometime. I love Pollux, by the way. So, you know, it's just sort of made the expectation of the quality of the food 30 years later is much higher. It took 30 years in time, and it was step by step. Nothing came overnight. Starbucks has been in the market for over 25 years. And they've only really been popular in the last, I would say, maybe 15 years. So it took a good 5 to 10 years for Starbucks to get popular. When we first launched Starbucks, we were one of the first international franchisees. So my boss, David Sun, he was very famous in Taiwan. He brought in McDonald's in 1986 to Taiwan, See's Candy, Hara Cafe to Taiwan. So he was very well known in the F&B industry. And I was very fortunate to work with him. I learned a lot. And he brought Starbucks to Beijing. So when we first launched Starbucks, we did not launch Starbucks as this is coffee, learn how to drink coffee. We launched Starbucks as we are a lifestyle from the US. We are a brand. So, having the Starbucks logo, on your desk makes you more sophisticated. It's like having an LV purse. So we were launching an experience, a lifestyle. We were the team that opened the Forbidden City store. That's a whole nother story. It's completely different from what the news makes it out to be. Okay.
Tell me the story.
Well, there was an article in the Washington Post that said, there's a new stink in the Forbidden City. It's the smell of coffee. So in the news, they made it like Starbucks forced our way into the Forbidden City. Okay, remember, this is the Forbidden City. It's owned by the Beijing government. Okay, you cannot force your way into the Forbidden City. And in the beginning, they asked us to come in. I did not want to go in because I did not feel that the Forbidden City had our demographics. Because at the time, our demographics were high-end, white-collar, expats. Forbidden City is tourist, right? It's tourists, and it's Chinese tourists. They're never going to come back. So why would they come into the Forbidden City to see, of course, the beautiful Forbidden City, and spend like 20, 30 RMB on coffee? If I were them, I would rather buy a souvenir from the Forbidden City. They made Starbucks go into the Forbidden City. They asked David, and David, of course, being my boss, said, just open that store. No complaints, just do it. So we opened, Starbucks opened a 20 square meter store. It was very difficult because everything is ancient. You can't really touch anything. And it was our most expensive store insurance-wise, because the insurance brokers were like, if you spill coffee onto that sidewalk, it's like 1,000 years old or 500 years old, and it'll cost us a fortune. So the insurance rate was horrendous there. So the Forbidden City, Starbucks was asked to go into the Forbidden City. And personally, at the time, I was not a huge fan of going in because I just felt it was not the demographics of Starbucks.